So how are we all doing? Are we all happy with what's... We've already talked about that on our prayer time, about what's happening on the news, but how hard is it to accept everybody that's living and doing things that we don't think they should be doing? That's okay. That's all right. Got to measure 6 feet now. You know, it's hard to accept people that we think are not living like we think they should live, right? Paul talks about the weak Christians. And I think we all can probably look at people we think are weak Christians, but is it really our part to decide who's living the right kind of life? Maybe we don't like people that don't look like us or act like us. Maybe they don't like us either because the way we act. I don't know. We evaluate people based on our perspective and not what God wants. We look at somebody and make an immediate impression. I don't know how many times you've done that. You're walking down a sidewalk or you're walking in through a store and somebody's coming the other way, and immediately you just feel like you want to move away or walk down an aisle because you don't want to pass them because of how they look. We don't know what's in that person's heart. We need to accept every single person. Just because they look different, act different, they don't act like you do, so it doesn't mean we should not accept them. Paul talks about those people in Romans. Paul says we're not to pass judgment on them because they don't act like we think they should, that we're not to exasperate them. Now, not that we would ever get in somebody's face because we don't think they're acting right or living right, but we're not supposed to really put a stumbling block in front of them. You ever think of that? When they're not acting like we think they should, or they're not part of our discussions, or they don't accept our ideas, or maybe they even reject us, how should we treat that person? We should not reject those people. We should accept everyone, even if they don't accept us. And that's what Paul is telling us in our text today. And I wonder how that makes you feel today. How many times you've heard debates over what is right to eat? All sorts of diets. The publishing companies make millions of dollars a year with all these different diet ideas. And man, go on the internet and search healthy diets, and you could never be healthy if you tried every one of those diets that they tell you is a healthy diet. But there are still people that go down to the basic argument of what's clean and unclean to eat. We look at that as an Old Testament issue, but there are still people today that don't eat certain foods. Some religions choose not to eat pork. I know Anita just met an individual like that a few months ago from their corporate level that doesn't eat pork. And they had a nice little discussion about that, but it wasn't a conversation of him judging her or her judging him. This is because that's his faith and that's what he chooses not to do. And we should not debate those things with them. It's okay to ask questions and learn, enrich our own knowledge because of how someone else chooses to live. Paul says one person's faith permits them to believe they may eat anything, and another weaker one may limit their eating to vegetables. Is it our part to judge any of them or anyone in general? Paul says in verse 3, we should not look down on them because of the way we eat and the way they choose not to. Or maybe their beliefs are a little bit different than ours. Should we look down at them? I had a discussion with Linda before church, or maybe, no, I guess it was Edwina, about if all the churches would just get together for a common cause, think of the difference we could make. And that's sort of what they're trying to do in Washington, D.C. on the 26th, is bring all the churches to one mindset for one issue to try to make a difference in our world. But instead, we all have our little idiosyncrasies of how we do church, and we can't get along with each other. So if we could join and unite, and I pray that this has, some bearing on turning the country around, with the churches beginning to unite over some issue that we can agree upon. But we can't be a stumbling block to other people, not to criticize or pass judgment. if we digress a bit and go back to Old Testament days, God opened the sea for the people to escape Egypt. And there was a great rejoicing because the Israelites crossed the sea on dry land and were saved. And there's an old rabbi teaching that the rabbis taught for years about God watching down when the Israelites were coming across the river and the land was dry and everybody was saved and the people reached the shore. And all the angels in heaven rejoiced because the Israelites were free. And then the army of the Egyptians was crowding across the river. They were rapidly approaching the other side of the river, and the waters come crashing back down. And the rabbi teaching said that the angels rejoiced because the Egyptian army was crushed. And God looked to the angels and said, "Why would you rejoice? Because some of my people perished." Do we ever think of life like that? When we see people like the Egyptian army, we feel we're in pursuit. Somebody's pursuing us, and something happens to them. Do we think you deserved it sometimes? I like that old teaching of the rabbis because it gives us a different perspective of when we should rejoice. Why rejoice when a group of God's people is killed? Do we celebrate when certain people are brought to their knees? Sometimes I think, especially if you watch the news, they celebrate a lot of those things and try to bring that up. But how do we do it accepting all people? If you turn on the news, you see all the great unrest in our country. That was mentioned on our prayer time. And in the midst of all the unrest, we're in the midst of a presidential election year. And there's a lot of mudslinging going on with that, just as there is with all of the levels of competition for elected offices. There's always mudslinging. And I always say, if you tell me what you can do, I can make a better decision than if you tell me how bad your opponent is. You know, we could always badmouth people, but tell me what you can do. But you know, in the midst of all of those things, something happens in our life that directly impacts us. We see all this going on. We're in the midst of the COVID isolation, and we're trying our best to stay separate and be healthy and stay safe and protect each other. But somehow in the midst of that, something truly crushes you emotionally or spiritually. How can we move forward in the midst of all of our troubles? How can we possibly go forward at a time like we're in right now, when we see all the rioting, the protests, and the marches, whatever you want to call the gatherings that we witness on TV? People are being hurt and property is being destroyed. Can we accept the people that are doing it? I know I have a hard time personally, but they're God's people. We should be praying for them to see the light, to realize what they're doing is not bringing any benefit or any interest in their cause. If they have a purpose and they have a reason of what they're doing is good, then they need to find a better way of getting the message out, because if who they're supporting by destroying things is really important, all the destruction and the rioting certainly does no good to lift people to support their cause. How can we accept those people? I find it hard to accept somebody walking down the street protesting under the banner that a certain type of life matters when all lives matter, and yet several of the people that are in the protest group begin to harass people on the sidewalk that have nothing to do with what they're upset about. Or they step out in front of a car that's driving innocently down the street and begin to destroy the car. Or step out in the street, we heard, and shoot at police officers. There was an incident where a mother and children were driving down the street, and the crowd stepped out in front of the street and began to smash the windows out of her car, and her children were terrified, and so was the mother. She had nothing to do with what was going on that had upset the crowd of people. Things escalate into rage of anger, and businesses are trashed that have done nothing to really should upset the people that are protesting. Why did anyone walking along the sidewalk or driving in a car or simply owning a business, what did any of those people have to do with the protesters that could possibly justify harassment or the damage that was done by the protesters? And we look at that and think, how can we move forward as a church and as individuals. You see, we can and we should and we must ask God to go with us. We need to be focused on what God wants us to do, not celebrating over who we consider enemies or the losers, because there is no winner or loser in any of those situations. Ask God to help us recognize that He's with us during the difficult times and the good times. God is with us. God goes before us. God goes behind us. We need to rejoice that God is with us and that we can accept everyone for who they are, which is a beautiful creation of God. And I know that we've all had a hard time accepting people at different times in our life. As I pause, I think back at some people that I had found a hard time accepting in my life. Maybe somebody just recently has done something that has really upset you, and it makes it impossible for you to accept them. Maybe it's something that happened a long time ago. Somebody back in grade school or high school that was a bully or something. Somebody's done something that you just can't get over. You can't get it out of your memory because you were wronged with someone. We will never understand why other people do what they do, but we can accept them as God's creations. We will never understand all the unrest in our country that we witness almost daily on the news. We're not going to be able to solve all the issues here today in our worship service. We're not going to be able to explain why some seem to win and some seem to lose. As I said earlier, there is no winners or losers. And we're probably not going to be truly able to accept both sides of the conflict, because it's hard for us to see beyond the destruction and the anger and the bitterness. So what can we do as a church? What must we do as a church? We must ask God to go with us at all times. Ask God to be with us during the good times. Ask God to be with us during the tough times. And we have to ask God to help us accept the fact that most of these situations of unrest we see on the news, there is no winner. There is no loser. And so many times the people get so caught up in the moment that they don't even have a reason for doing what they're doing. We need to focus on the presence of God. We can rejoice that God is with us. We can rejoice that God is with the people that are experiencing the attacks or whatever you want to call it. We have to accept the fact that God is with the people that are causing the problems, because God is with everybody. Is God happy with their actions? Absolutely not. But we need to focus on the fact that God is our hope. We can be assured that God always makes a way for everything, for every person. God makes a way for us, even when things seem to be out of control in our country. I'm thankful that we feel peaceful right here in our own setting, in our local community. We can feel at peace. But it doesn't take long when you turn the radio or the TV on and listen to what's going on to become concerned. God is our hope. God will always be our hope. The hope that we live out in our moving forward against all the turmoil, when our only option seems to be lying down and giving up. It's easy to say there's nothing we can do as a church, right? It's so easy to just get frustrated and give up. But I want to tell you, do not give up. God accepts everybody, and so can we. In the midst of the turmoil, do you feel like the Israelites in the Exodus story? Do you feel like you're slowly plodding along, putting one foot in front of the other, staring at the walls of water on either side of you that are ready to crash down upon you? Do you feel threatened by the unrest, by the COVID situation? We feel threatened by those who do not think or act like us. Just like the Israelites, we need to keep our eyes on the hope that God has given us. God is leading us. Do you believe that? God is guiding us this very moment. God has a direction for us to go. And we may not know where we're heading. But I always think back when Jesus sent the disciples out, or when Abraham was called. I love the story of Abraham. God says to Abraham, go. He didn't give him directions. He didn't give him anything about what he was supposed to do. And I think God is telling us today that we need to just go and accept the people. We don't know what the church is going to look like tomorrow, 6 months down the road, a year down the road. We have no clue what the church is going to look like. But one thing is for certain, God is going to go before us as we go out and accept the differences of people without judging. Are we going to be able to accept the setbacks we may encounter or the frustrations? Can we accept the people that God sends to us to reach? You see, there are a lot of people in our community that are searching for something in the midst of these trying times. Are we willing to accept them with whatever baggage they bring to the church? At times I feel that we're in the wilderness. Maybe we're standing on the shore looking ahead at the walls of water on either side, as I said earlier. Remember what God has accomplished. Think about the Israelite nation. A whole nation of people had been rejected. That whole nation of people was in slavery. They were being abused and mistreated. God did not forget them. God was before them. God delivered them through what they stood before and thought, there's no way we can cross that river, and the army's in pursuit. But God made a way. But we need to be looking ahead. God has accomplished a lot. God accepts us. Are we willing to accept others as God accepts us? As we look back today, as we look back, we should be amazed at what God has accomplished in spite of us. You ever think about that? We didn't get to meet for a while. We were live streaming. We were doing some parking lot services. We just didn't know what we were doing. We went outside. We had some beautiful weather. God gave us a beautiful Sunday every Sunday. We made a choice to come inside today, and it's raining. We should be thankful and amazed at what God has accomplished in the last couple of months, despite our thoughts and our frustrations and our fears and our concerns. And we're not done with our journey. God has us on a journey. I truly believe that. God has a lot in store for us. And those that we don't even know yet are going to be coming to us, or we're going to be meeting people and inviting them. And we need to accept people when we call them in. We are called to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. We've talked about that. We do that one soul at a time, and we're not finished with that journey. God is calling us to continue that journey. We're still wandering around trying to find our direction in the midst of everything we see going on around us. We need to get our focus. We need to look forward towards our goal. We need to look ahead in confidence at what God has in store for us as we accept everyone as they are accepted in God's eyes. So ask God to show you someone who needs invited to church. Everybody here knows someone that we can invite to church. Invite them. And when they come, may all of us accept whoever walks through these doors, and then step back when we do that and watch what God is going to accomplish as we accept all the people as He accepts them.